The whole street watched as Uncle James slapped Daniel so hard, he fell face first into the sand, his clothes torn and his dignity scattered like the morning dust. But what they didn't know was this: the boy they humiliated today would soon rise higher than all of them, in a way that would make them beg for his forgiveness. Left with nothing but his name, a broken heart, and a stubborn spark of hope, Daniel made a silent vow that day. I will not die like this. I will show them. I will show the world. How he fulfilled that vow, and who cried the most when he returned, would shock the entire town. Daniel wiped the blood from his nose with the back of his hand and looked around. Faces stared back at him, some pitying, most disgusted. His little cousin, Simi, peeped from behind the curtain, her eyes wide with fear. Leave this house, Uncle James roared. And don't you dare step back here until you can pay for your own food. Daniel didn't argue. There was no point. No father. No mother. No family. He staggered up, picked up his small, torn bag, and walked away without looking back. The sun was already hot, and Daniel had nowhere to go. The streets of Lagos were not kind to boys like him, boys with no money, no protection, and no power. He wandered through the bustling streets of Lagos, the air thick with dust and the smell of roasted corn. His stomach growled, but he had no money. He sat by the roadside, watching people live their lives, mothers shouting prices at the market, boys his age selling sachet water, girls laughing with their friends. Is this how my life will be forever? Daniel thought. A man bumped into him roughly, muttering an insult. Daniel said nothing. By nightfall, the streetlights flickered weakly. Daniel found an abandoned kiosk and curled up inside, using his bag as a pillow. Tears threatened to spill from his eyes. But he forced them back. He had cried enough when his mother died. Crying had changed nothing. The next morning, Daniel woke up hungry and stiff. He walked the streets aimlessly until he found a construction site where men were lifting heavy blocks. Can I help? Daniel asked the foreman, a huge man with a cigarette dangling from his mouth. The man laughed. You be small rat. Carry block kill yourself. The workers laughed. Daniel's cheeks burned with shame. He turned to leave, but the foreman called him back. Wait. Sweep the place. I fit give you small money. Daniel grabbed the broom and swept like his life depended on it. At the end of the day, the foreman tossed him a crumpled 500 naira note. It wasn't much, but to Daniel, it was hope. He bought a loaf of bread and a sachet of pure water and ate slowly under a bridge. As he ate, he overheard two men talking nearby. Dem day look for boys way sobby work for kitchen for islando, one said. Dem go pay better money. Daniel's heart leapt. He wiped his mouth, stood up, and approached them shyly. Please sir, he said. Where can I find the place? The men sized him up, then gave him a location, a restaurant on Victoria Island that needed cleaners and dishwashers. It was far. Daniel had no transport fare. But his legs still worked. And his heart was still stubborn. He began the long trek. The walk took almost 4 hours. His feet ached. His throat was dry again. But when Daniel finally arrived at the restaurant, he was amazed. It was not a small buka like the ones he knew. It was a fancy place with glass doors, white tablecloths, and well-dressed customers. He hesitated at the door, suddenly aware of his torn shirt and dusty sandals. But he pushed the door open. A lady at the front desk frowned. Can I help you? I heard you're looking for workers, Daniel said, trying to sound confident. The lady looked him up and down. Wait here. Minutes later, a manager came out, a man with glasses and a kind but tired face. You want to work here? The manager asked. Yes, sir, Daniel said. Can you wash plates? I can do anything, sir. The manager chuckled. What's your name? Daniel, sir. All right, Daniel. You start tomorrow. Be here by 7 a.m. sharp. No excuses. Daniel bowed deeply. Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir. That night, Daniel found an abandoned church nearby and slept on the steps, hugging his bag tightly. For the first time in days, he felt a tiny seed of hope growing inside him. Maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. The next morning, Daniel was at the restaurant before 6:30 a.m. He washed plates, swept floors, ran errands, anything they asked. he did it without complaint. The chefs liked him because he was fast and polite. The customers liked him because he smiled even when tired. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, while Daniel was mopping the floor, he heard a commotion at the entrance. A woman had collapsed. A rich-looking woman, with gold jewelry and high heels. People panicked. Some shouted for water. Others just stood and stared. Without thinking, Daniel dropped the mop and rushed over. He lifted the woman's head gently and loosened her tight scarf. "Auntie, you will be okay," he whispered. He asked for salt water and someone brought it. He dabbed her forehead until she slowly opened her eyes. The woman's driver arrived and thanked Daniel profusely. The woman herself, still weak, asked for his name. "Daniel, Ma." She smiled faintly. "God bless you, Daniel." The next day, the woman's driver returned and handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was a letter offering him a scholarship, paid by the woman's family for any school of his choice. Daniel could hardly believe it. He showed the letter to his manager, who clapped him on the back. "You see? Good heart no day hide," the man said. The restaurant staff gathered to celebrate Daniel. They bought him a small cake with "Congratulations, Daniel," written in blue icing. Daniel applied to a technical college in Surulere and started attending classes in the evenings while still working at the restaurant during the day. Life was still hard, money was still tight, but for the first time, Daniel was building something real. He studied mechanical engineering. He loved machines, how they worked, how they could be fixed. He dreamed of one day opening his own repair company, and never being at the mercy of anyone again. Months later, Daniel sat for his first big exam. He passed with flying colors. He kept working at the restaurant, kept studying, kept dreaming. He grew taller, stronger, more confident. People no longer looked at him with pity. They looked at him with respect. One evening, as Daniel closed up at the restaurant, a familiar figure walked past. It was Uncle Jide. Daniel froze. Uncle James looked thinner, older, weaker. His eyes were sunken. He was carrying a bag of cheap clothes to sell by the roadside. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Uncle James looked away and hurried on. Daniel stood still, heart pounding. Now he is the one struggling, not me, he thought. But he felt no joy, only sadness. Life had a way of humbling the proud. Daniel stood outside the restaurant for a long time after Uncle James disappeared into the crowd. Memories flooded back, the insults, the beatings, the cold nights spent hungry and alone. But instead of anger, Daniel felt something unexpected, forgiveness. Maybe he was just a broken man too, Daniel thought. That night, as he cleaned the tables and mopped the floors, he made another silent vow. "I will rise so high that even those who hated me will have no choice but to clap when they hear my name." The following week, Daniel got his first real opportunity. One of the restaurant's regular customers, a businessman named Mr. Benson, noticed Daniel fixing a broken blender in the kitchen. "Boy, you good with your hands?" Mr. Benson asked. "Yes, sir," Daniel said proudly. Mr. Benson smiled. "Come see me tomorrow. I have something for you." Daniel barely slept that night, his mind racing with possibilities. The next day, dressed in his cleanest clothes, Daniel visited Mr. Benson's office, a sleek building on the island. Mr. Benson offered him a 6-month paid apprenticeship at his small mechanical engineering firm. "If you do well," Mr. Benson said, "I might even hire you full-time." Tears filled Daniel's eyes, but he blinked them away and bowed deeply. "Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you." At the firm, Daniel learned how to fix heavy machines, generators, air conditioners, water pumps. He loved every second. His hands were always dirty, his shirts always soaked with sweat, but his heart was full. Slowly, he started saving money. Tiny amounts at first, then bigger. He dreamed of the day he could open Daniel Tech Repairs, his own shop where he could hire boys like himself, boys society had thrown away. But life, as always, wasn't smooth. One evening, as Daniel was closing the workshop, 3 armed robbers stormed in. They beat him up badly and stole the little money he had been saving. Bruised and bleeding, Daniel lay on the floor of the workshop, feeling like the world had crushed him again. "Why? Why me? After everything?" he whispered. But even in the pain, something deep inside him refused to die. He wiped his tears and staggered to his feet. You can beat me down, but you will never bury me, he thought fiercely. The next morning, despite his bruised face and aching body, Daniel reported to work as if nothing had happened. The staff were shocked. Mr. Benson clapped him on the back. You're stronger than you look, boy. You'll go far. Months passed. Daniel finished his apprenticeship and was officially hired by Mr. Benson's company. Not just hired, promoted. He became the lead technician, managing a team of 5 workers. At just 20 years old, Daniel was earning more than Uncle James had ever dreamed of. He moved into a small but clean one-room apartment and bought a second-hand motorcycle. Freedom tasted sweet. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel decided to visit his old street in Lagos. Not to boast, just to see how far he had come. The moment he stepped into the dusty street, people stared. Some didn't recognize him. He had grown taller, broader, and more confident. But Simi, his little cousin, recognized him immediately. She screamed and ran to hug him. Brother Daniel. Brother Daniel. Tears sprang to Daniel's eyes as he hugged her tightly. Simi was taller now, about 12 years old, but her eyes still shone with the same innocence. Where is Uncle Jide? Daniel asked. Simi's smile faded. She pointed sadly to a small shack nearby. Daniel approached. Inside, he found Uncle James lying on a mat, coughing violently. The once proud man now looked frail, a shadow of his former self. Uncle James looked up weakly. When he saw Daniel, shame flooded his face. He tried to sit up but winced in pain. I heard you were doing well, he croaked. I am sorry, Daniel. Daniel said nothing for a moment. He simply sat down beside his uncle. You were hard on me, Daniel said quietly. But maybe if you hadn't been, I wouldn't have fought so hard to survive. Uncle Jide's eyes welled up with tears. I'm proud of you, boy, he whispered. More than you know. Daniel smiled sadly. He reached into his bag and pulled out an envelope, money he had saved for months. Use this for your treatment, Uncle, Daniel said, pressing the envelope into the man's shaking hands. Uncle James broke down in tears. Word spread quickly through the street that Daniel had returned, not with pride or arrogance, but with kindness. The same neighbors who once mocked him now praised him. Children pointed and whispered, That's Daniel. The one who made it. Old women blessed him loudly. Young boys stared in awe. Daniel spent the evening playing football with the local kids, laughing freely. He even bought roasted corn for everyone. The little street that once rejected him now celebrated him. But Daniel stayed humble. He knew success wasn't about showing off, it was about lifting others up. A few months later, Daniel finally achieved his dream. He opened Daniel Tech Repairs. He hired 4 young boys from Lagos, boys just like him once, and trained them. He paid them fairly. He encouraged them. He believed in them. Soon, the business boomed. Big companies started calling Daniel for contracts. He expanded, opening a second workshop. Daniel, the boy who had once slept under bridges, was now a respected businessman in Lagos. One day, as he sat in his small but neat office, sipping a bottle of malt, Daniel smiled. He remembered that slap. That dusty fall. That long walk to Victoria Island. That broken nose. That broken heart. And he whispered to himself. They thought they buried me. They didn't know I was a seed. Now, here's the twist and emotional punch. Years later, Daniel received an award from the state government, Young Entrepreneur of the Year. The ceremony was grand, held at a beautiful hall with TV cameras and important dignitaries. As Daniel stepped on stage to receive his plaque, he spotted a figure at the back of the room. It was Uncle James, standing tall, clapping the loudest, tears streaming down his face. Daniel's voice shook with emotion as he gave his speech. I dedicate this award to every boy who was told he was nothing. To every girl who was laughed at because she was poor. To everyone who was ever abandoned. You are not your circumstances. You are your dreams. The crowd erupted into applause. Daniel looked up, smiled through his tears, and whispered, Mama, I made it. Daniel thought he had reached the peak of his life. But life, as always, had new lessons waiting. Just 2 years after opening his second workshop, Daniel was approached by a wealthy investor named Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Maxwell wore expensive suits, drove sleek cars, and spoke with the smoothness of melted butter. "I see potential in you, Daniel," Mr. Maxwell said. "With my investment, you could own the biggest tech repair chain in West Africa." Daniel hesitated. Something about the man's smile felt slippery. But the dream was too tempting. Against his instincts, Daniel agreed. He signed a partnership deal, one he barely understood. Within months, Daniel's name was everywhere. Billboards, TV ads, social media. Daniel Tech Repairs, fast, trusted, reliable. Customers flooded in. Money rained like a storm. Daniel bought a small house for himself. A new car. He even sponsored Simi, his little cousin, to attend a good private school. Life was beautiful. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Mr. Maxwell started changing terms. He brought in his own managers, cold men who cared more about cutting costs than serving customers. Complaints rolled in. Staff left. Customers felt cheated. Daniel tried to protest, but Mr. Maxwell waved the contract in his face. "You signed everything over to me, Daniel," he sneered. "You're just the face now. A mascot. Nothing more." Daniel's heart broke. He had built this dream with blood and tears. And now, it was slipping away. He was trapped. Weeks later, Daniel stood outside his own workshop, a place he no longer controlled, and watched strangers mishandle customers he once knew by name. He clenched his fists. "I made a mistake," he whispered. But he refused to cry. One evening, as he sat alone in his small house, broke and defeated, an old memory surfaced, the memory of sleeping under the bridge, the memory of hunger gnawing at his belly, the memory of fighting to survive. And something inside him snapped. He would not go down quietly. Not this time. Daniel took a deep breath and began again. He had a few thousands left in his account. Not much, but enough. He found a small abandoned mechanic shop in a quieter part of the city. It smelled of oil and dust. The roof leaked. The walls were cracked. But to Daniel, it was gold. He spent nights scrubbing floors, painting walls, fixing broken shelves. He called it Seed Tech Repairs because he knew now, truly, that every fall was a planting, not a burial. He hired 2 boys from the street, Tund and Ibuka, and trained them personally. He promised them, "You won't just fix machines here. You'll build your future." Slowly, customers returned. First 10, then 20, then 100. People remembered the boy who had once fixed their generators with a smile. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Seed Tech grew faster than Daniel could have dreamed. Meanwhile, Mr. Maxwell's stolen empire began to crumble. Without Daniel's heart and leadership, Daniel Tech Repairs became just another soulless company. Customers left. Workers quit. Debt piled up. Within a year, Mr. Maxwell was forced to sell off the company at a loss. Karma had done its work. One rainy night, Daniel closed his small shop and walked home, drenched but smiling. As he approached his door, he noticed a figure sitting on his porch, a woman, shivering in the rain. It was Amaka, the girl he had once loved from afar when he was a poor orphan. She looked thinner now, worn down by life. "Daniel," she whispered, tears blending with the rain. "I heard what you became. I had nowhere else to go." Daniel took her in without hesitation. He gave her food, a warm bath, a safe place to sleep. He asked no questions. Over the next few months, Amaka blossomed under his care. She started working at Seed Tech as the customer service manager. Together, they rebuilt not just the company but each other. Love, real and deep, grew between them. One evening, under the shade of a mango tree near the workshop, Daniel proposed to Amaka with a simple silver ring he had saved for. She said yes, sobbing into his chest. It wasn't the fairy tale proposal the world worshipped. It was raw, honest, beautiful. Daniel's life became simple but full. He married Amaka in a small ceremony attended by friends, loyal customers, and street children he had once helped. He bought a plot of land and built a humble 2-bedroom house. He even opened a free training center where street boys and girls could learn mechanical skills. His motto was simple. No child should suffer just because they were born poor. Now, the final emotional twist. One morning, Daniel received a letter from a wealthy philanthropist organization. They had heard about his free training center. They wanted to partner with Seed Tech, offering grants, sponsorships, and expanding his dream nationwide. Tears blurred Daniel's eyes as he read the letter. He looked at Amaka, at the boys fixing machines, at the little girls learning to solder wires. He thought about the long road, the hunger, the beatings, the betrayals. And he realized. He hadn't just survived poverty. He had broken its chains for generations to come. At the grand opening of Seed Tech Academy, Daniel stood before the crowd. With Amaka at his side, Simi cheering from the front row, and dozens of smiling young faces looking up to him, he said, "I was once called worthless. I was once thrown away like trash. But I was never trash. I was a seed. Today, I plant more seeds and no storm will ever uproot us again." The audience erupted into cheers. Daniel raised his hand high, and the sun seemed to shine just a little brighter.